to those of you who are expecting a program by the Lancaster Medical Heritage Museum, I have a difficult time talking about medical stuff, even with my own doctor, so it wouldn't go well if I tried to follow that from that. This is my 8th or 9th program for the Society. The first ones that I did were all about New Holland. So this is the first time I've ventured outside of New Holland. Of course, I didn't venture very far, but tonight's program will be about Blue Ball. I can't think about Blue Ball without bringing up Paul M. Weaver and his daughter, Pat Carpenter. They've done a lot for our museum and our society. They're both gone now, but they worked very hard on getting information together. Paul was sort of Blue Ball's historian, and Pat was his daughter. And they put together a video for us up at the museum that if you're really interested in Blue Ball, visit the museum Thursday or Saturday from 10 to 2 and ask the docent to put on the Blue Ball exhibit on the video monitor there. It's very well done. I think I should also thank Annette Lockwood, who is Paul Weaver's daughter. She's the executrix for her parents' estate. And this summer, she was very generous with donating a large part of Paul's collection. So again, if you're interested in Blue Ball, you should really visit the museum and go over to the library, and it's on the bottom shelf on the right side. There are notebooks there that come from Paul Weaver's collection. A lot of Blue Ball, a lot of information. You can stay entertained for hours if you read everything that was in his collection. So tonight, the program is postcards. All of them but 2 are in my collection. But it's going to be about Blue Ball, and a lot of these postcards are around the square because that's really where all the activity was years ago. The postcards are all from the golden age of postcard collecting, and that was from the early 20th century until, I'm going to say, the year 1917. By 1917, more people had telephones, and so they were calling back and forth instead of sending postcards. The postcard collectors, the stock wasn't as good a quality because the early postcards, the highest quality, were printed in Germany. And by 1917, Germany was melting down a lot of their printing presses for the war effort. But probably the biggest thing that ended the golden age of postcard collecting and postcards was in 1917, they doubled the price of sending a postcard through the mail. It went from 1 penny to 2 pennies. So that discouraged some people from sending them. Okay, I'll sit down and do it from my seat. What'd you say? Did I turn it on? Oh, yeah, no. Okay. Okay, during the golden age of postcards in the early 20th century, there were no published lithograph views. When I say a lithograph view, that would be a postcard that was printed in mass quantities, and one way to tell if it's lithographed is to look at it through a magnifying glass, and you can see little dots in the picture, sort of like a newspaper. What these are tonight are real photo postcards. In other words, they are developed from the original negative, and that's what we're going to be seeing. I do have a confession to make about this very first picture. It's and I didn't make the. I did this program on Monday night at the Lancaster Farm and Home Center for the Postcard Club, and I didn't make the confession there because they're all postcard collectors. This first one is not a postcard; it's a photo. That is the Blue Ball Machine Works, and I think what the most interesting part of this is, at that time, Peter Shirk was the owner, and he was an inventor. And look right at the left side at the door. Do you see that? Peter Shirk invented a tractor about 1904, 1905. That tractor was powered by a 1-horsepower New Holland gasoline engine. And there is the tractor sitting there by the door. We're going to just start at the beginning because this really was the beginning where Blue Ball got its name. Robert Wallace, the Wallaces bought homesteaded in just east of Blue Ball early on, before the 1760s. But in the 1760s, Robert Wallace bought a plot of land and built a tavern and hung the Blue Ball out. And right there, it was at the intersection of the Paxtang and Horseshoe Roads. And it was the sign of the Blue Ball. That was what the tavern was. And in 1833, the town was named after the sign of the Blue Ball by the tavern. But this is actually a picture of a picture. This is not a postcard from my collection, but it's a picture I took, and it's one of my 50 favorite postcards, but I don't possess it at this point. But did anybody notice anything unusual about the Blue Ball Hotel there in this picture? There's no Blue Ball, exactly right. Okay, we'll see why. Actually, the Blue Ball at that time was hung off to the east side of the hotel. There's a shot of it. Now, this is looking from the square right at the Blue Ball. The original hotel was only 2 stories tall, and it was possible that it was built in sections. There are 2 different levels, and you'll be able to see that. You can sort of see steps up on the right side. When it was built in the 1760s, I'm not certain that it was both levels, but we know in 1855 that this is exactly what it looked like, because there is an engraving on the 3 Earls map dated 1855 of the Blue Ball Hotel, and this is what it looked like. There's another photo relaxing on the front porch. I guess there wasn't that much to do. We're going to go right around the square then, and you're going to, by the end of this program, you'll have a pretty good idea of what Blue Ball looked like in the square 110 or 115 years ago. There's another postcard of the Blue Ball Hotel, and it says that the proprietor is Samuel High. Now, is there anybody in this room that may be descended from Samuel High or knows what he looks like and can identify him? He's the one in the white shirt. Well, that would make sense, because he's the proprietor of the hotel. And he is your, what, Mitch? Great-great? Yes. Okay, great-great-grandfather. Okay, about the year 1912, the 2-story building was changed to 3 stories. In those days, at the beginning of the 20th century, hotel proprietors were required to get licensed, and sometimes at that time, there was often pressure applied from the licensing board to install modern conveniences in the local hotels, and that could have been a reason why work was done in the Blue Ball Hotel. What they did was they added a 3rd floor and then faced it up and re-bricked the outside. So it looks very different than what it did earlier. If you look up Blue Ball on Wikipedia, what they said there is that it wasn't actually called the Blue Ball Hotel until Prohibition. I would disagree with that. This postcard's probably from about 1913, and you can see the sign on the left side that says Blue Ball Hotel. There's one from 1915. Okay, these are earlier pictures, and I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to start going around the square, and we're going to do it clockwise. Because the hotel was at the intersection of 2 major roads, by the late 18th century, it became the center for the livestock trade in the eastern part of the county. In the early years, auctions were held at the livery that was located to the west of the hotel. So you can see towards the middle of the picture is the Blue Ball Hotel. The livery is off to the right. And this looks like auction day because you can see a crowd there. There's another one. The Blue Ball Hotel is off to the left. And George K. Diller's livery is where the auction is being held. At this time, George K. Diller owned the business, and he was in business with his son, George C. Diller. So George C. Diller died in 1908. So George K. Diller was by himself. We'll go over this a little bit more as we go around the block. Now, this is during auction day, and now this is looking west towards Route 23, that building is still standing. You can just see the corner of the Blue Ball Hotel off to the left side. Okay, here's a picture of auction day. Now this is on Route 322 looking towards the square. Look how different the roads look. This is before they were paved, and look how narrow it is. I mean, there's 3 lanes there now at the intersection. It's a pretty narrow. On the right side, that is Geist's store. But we're going to go right around the block and look at everything. If you look through the trees on the left, that's where the gas station is now. But up on the hill is the Yunt Mansion. That building is still standing. If you look towards the middle of it, behind the trees, right in the middle of the picture, that would be Lewis's harness shop. And that is right on the square, and that's been torn down and made part of the road. And of course, here on the left side is Geist's store. It was owned by and run by Adam Geist and Everett Geist, but Adam died in 1904, and so Everett took over the business. In 1909, the auction barn beside the hotel burned to the ground. George K. Diller, who owned the business, would lose everything. His son, who was his partner in the business, died a year before in 1908. By the end of 1910, George K. Diller was dead. There's going to be a couple of pictures of the fire when the livery burned, and this is the description on the back. This is the Blue Ball Fire, a big livery barn with over 40 horses, which burned. It is a wonderful fire. Now, think about that. In those days, I think the term wonderful was a little different than what we think. It's a wonder. I think it was a very large fire, and there were 40 horses that were killed in that fire. There's one picture. The structure was fitted up with every up-to-date feature and protected by a galvanized iron roof or steel roof. It was only 3 years old when it burned. 47 horses and mules were actually saved by taking them out the back door, but 40 were also lost. The fire spread not only through the livery, which had tons of hay in it and straw, and what happened was it was a windy evening, and that hay and straw caught in the wind, and they were putting out fires throughout the neighborhood. The way they caught the fire was the first person to recognize it was a trolley coming into town, and they rang the bell. The trolley went up to Terry Hill, brought people back from Terry Hill, went to New Holland, sent people from New Holland. So basically the whole section of the county from Terry Hill to New Holland was helping put out the fire. But it did spread to B.F. Kutz's property. I think he was a blacksmith, and destroyed his residence and business. So after the fire and after George K. Diller died, John Bayer took over the livestock trade. So this was still, after the Dillers died, this was still the livestock center in this part of the country. And there's a picture of the hotel about 1913 or 1914. And there's the new livery where the auctions would be held every Thursday night next to it to the east. There's a photo of John Bayer's, or with an auction going on about 1913. There's a photo from about 1915, the stock that's going to be sold. There's another auction. But Bayer suffered the same fate as Diller. And his barn there was a major fire there, I think around 1916. And when his business burned, Harry Stauffer started having auctions behind the Steyer House in New Holland. The Steyer House later became Rubinson's. It was on the southwest corner of Railroad Avenue and Main Street. He started having auctions there, and in 1923, with several partners, he opened up Stauffer's auction sales barn. So the center of the livestock trade moved to New Holland in the late teens and the early 20s, and it's still here in New Holland. Okay, like I said, we're going to go right around the square. This was the Conestoga Traction Company waiting room. That building is still standing, and it was just to the west of the hotel and the livery. There's another picture of it. It's on the left side there. And to the right of it was M.H. Group's house. He was a tobacco dealer in town. There's a close-up of M.H. Group's residence, 1907. So basically now we've looked at the intersection. We looked at quadrant one of the intersection, and we're going to be still moving in clockwise. Now we're looking at the Conestoga Traction Company waiting room on the left side, and if the road going in the back is Route 23 going towards New Holland, this island on the right side is where the gas station is now. And you can see there's a big turn, and what's going on here is the trolley was running at that time. The trolley came to Blue Ball in the year 1904. But the problem was it couldn't navigate the steep grade of the hill in Blue Ball. So before it went down the hill in Blue Ball, it took a sharp turn to the left when it was coming from New Holland and cut across the back of the bank. So there it is. Now we're on Route 23 looking towards the square from New Holland's direction. So you can see how the trolley tracks go down on the right side of the road, in other words, the south side of Route 23, and then cut across and go back across. Let me just go to this one first. And go back across. You can see the bank over there on the left side, and the trolley cuts across behind the bank. This is in the second quadrant. When we first looked at it, I said the Yunt Mansion. This building is still standing. This was across the street from the Grube residence at the top of the square and was built on Madison Hill, where the local lawyer E.H. Yunt built the mansion, which still stands. The site was named after, Madison Hill was named after mysterious Jim Madison, a local legend who at one time lived in a lime kiln on the property. And if you want to learn more about mysterious Jim Madison, come to the museum. Part of Paul Weaver's collection includes a lengthy story about him, and it's very interesting. Okay, here we are in the second quadrant still. And this is where the trolley tracks cut across. So this would be below the Yunt Mansion towards the square. And you can see how they cut across towards Terry Hill. Now, this is a picture of the Blue Ball Bank when it was first built in 1907. And you see there's a porch there on the left side. And just to the left of the porch, you can see how the road sort of flattens out. That's where the trolley tracks went. So at this point in 1907, they really didn't complete the building yet. The bank had moved the business in, but it wasn't complete. Look at the front porch. There's what it looked like a year later in 1908. And again, you can look to the left and see how the road flattens out on the left side where the trolley tracks come across. So this picture is from 1908 of the bank. Now we see that building. It's still there, I guess, as an apartment, and it's really on the square. But in 1908, it was not directly on the square. There was actually a building to the east of the bank. There's a picture of the bank in 1915. Can you see something that was added that wasn't there before? The Blue Ball, yeah. Okay, this is the actual square in 1908, and you can see that the bank isn't there on the left side. That is W.J. Lewis's harness shop. I think there was also a restaurant there at a later time. But that was between the bank and the road. And something to take note of, do you see that road on the right side? It looks like a little driveway, doesn't it? That's actually Route 23, and it's just one lane. There's a close-up of W.J. Lewis's harness store. Okay, now we're ready to move to the third quadrant in the square. This is Everett Geist's store, and this is an early picture of Geist's store, probably taken shortly after his father Adam died in 1904. And you can see on the left side there is not an addition built out the back. There's one of 1915, and you can see that they built quite a large addition out the back. That was a general store, and that's probably where most of these postcards were sold, in that store. There's a couple more. There's posing in front of Evergeist store in a sulky. There's the gang's all here and ready for some fun in front of Geist store. Look closely at the man in the overalls just to the left of the horse on the right. That's the same man that's holding the reins and for getting ready for a hayride, I guess. And that's all taken in front of Geist store. Here's the Blue Ball shirt factory. It was located behind Geist store across the creek, so you can actually still see it from the square. If you stand in the square, you can see these. If you look down Route 23 towards Shady Maple, these buildings still stand. And at that time, a lot of the small towns, including Martindale, other small towns around, had shirt factories, and it was really big business. They were selling a lot of these shirts to either the stores in Philadelphia or even New York. The Giver family owned the Blue Ball shirt factory for many years, and I think it finally closed in the late 20s or early 30s. We're going to look at a few street scenes now, since we went around the block, the whole way around the block. This is what's now Route 322, looking east, and on the left side is the Coach Works. And again, a lot of local towns had Coach Works too. Probably, I would estimate 10 or 12 Coach Works were in Lancaster County, or probably more even, that they made their own coaches. But of course, the automobile put them out of business. This is another picture looking east, down 322, east of the square, and that's the Blue Ball Machine Works on the right side. There's another one looking west on 322, and the Blue Ball Machine Works are on the left side. Okay, we have some street views, and I'm not sure how well you can see. This is Route 23 looking towards New Holland, and you can see that the trolley tracks are on the south side of the street. If you're sitting up in the front row, there's something that you can see that probably not the people in the back row can't see. And if you can see kind of a black sign on the left side, right above the trolley tracks, you can see one there, and what that says, that sign says, "Cars stop here." And that was, in other words, where those signs are is where you'd have to wait if you wanted to get on the trolley. And the people in the front row, I don't know whether you can see it, but there's actually 4 signs you can see. Just look straight back the tracks. Can you see that? You can see 4 stops. This is what's now 1063 Main Street, and the picture was taken in 1915. And there's a few more there. This was a pretty ritzy neighborhood. Some of the owners of the homes in this neighborhood were Peter Shirk, who owned Blue Ball Machine Works, Dr. Winters, George C. Diller, the younger Diller, who owned the stables and was in business there. But these are all on what's Route 23, and you can't see the trolley tracks there because the trolley tracks were on the south side, and we're looking on the north side of Route 23, west of the square. There's another one, the same neighborhood. There's another one, the same neighborhood. Now this is looking east towards the square on the north side of the street. This is in the same neighborhood, but now this is on the south side of the street, and we can tell that because we can see the trolley tracks. The trolley tracks were on the south side of the street. And these houses are what now are 1052, 1050, and 1048 Main Street. And I believe in one of these houses, Paul Weaver's wife's father was born, who was a Whitwer. Prior to 1912, the main schoolhouse for anybody that lived in Blue Ball would be on the northeast corner of Ewell Road and Route 322. This is the old schoolhouse. In the year 1912, the school was replaced by a new one that was built west of the old school. It's now an apartment building. It's right across, I guess, from the road that turns down to the PA Auction Center. So that's on Route 322 on the north side of the street. That picture was taken about 1912. there's the same building taken about 1915. This is the last slide. This is actually not in Blue Ball, but this is Blue Ball's butcher, Harry Shirk. And I'm guessing he came to New Holland New Holland had Memorial Day parades quite extensive in 1908 and 1909, and so I'm guessing it's one of those years. When I acquired this card, or when I knew about it, first learned about it, I didn't know what the location was. And I was at my wit's end, and I have to give credit where credit's due, who located this for me, and that would be my wife, Ruth. The way she found out where it was is she remembered the house at 316 East Main Street having the corner cut out, and she recognized that just to the right side of the picture. So thank you, Ruth, for that. One other thing before I end here is one of our most recent donations at the museum is a John Davis tall case clock. John Davis made clocks in New Holland from about 1797 to I think about 1806. And this house shown on the left side, I believe that to be the house that John Davis lived in. That's where the Hollander Motel is now, but I believe that was John Davis's house. His workshop would have been to the west, where 316, where it's now the office for the Hollander Motel. The building that the Hollander Motel in, that was built by Jonathan Weaver, I think about 1885. But before that, it was a workshop, and I believe that's where the clock that was made. So if you haven't seen the John Davis clock, you should come up and visit the museum to see it. It's a beautiful clock. That's it. If there are any questions, I am not an expert on Blue Ball history, but if you have questions, I know a lot about the postcards. If you have any questions, I'll...
I have a mic here, so...
How many people went to the Blue Ball school, he asked? So we do have a few here. And it would be the one that was shown there, wasn't it? They used that up until the 1960s?
I'll start over here.
Okay.
I didn't know you were going to bring it to talk about it, but I'll talk about it. I think that you should have paid attention to the right side of the school, because that was where the baseball field is, and that means you hit up the hill to the outfield. So, and you ran up the hill to second base. So just so you know, we're tough down here.
So a lot of people raised their hands when they said how many went. How many people here have ever lived in Blue Ball? So we have quite a few of those too. Yeah. It looked a little different back in those days, didn't it? No more questions? Yes.
About 1922, I was with my uncle Arthur, and he had a country store at Joanna, and he also sold coal. So he had a 3-ton truck. It was a big truck in those days. He'd go up to the coal mines and come back down. Every time we get down on this area, he'd stop and have a beer before he went home. And we stopped at the Blue Ball Hotel, and he had his beer, and he always said to me, "Don't tell Margaret when I get home."
Now, do you remember, was it Riker's beer? Because that was a sign on, and at those times in the early 20th century, sometimes the brewers, they were wealthy enough that they would come out here and buy some of these local hotels just so their beer was being sold in the hotel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In 1922, Geist store went out of business, and they sold their stock to a New Holland store, Harris Brothers, New Holland.
Our business was in Blue Ball. My name is Charles Zimmerman, by J.B. Zimmerman is my father. So that's I was born right close to the Blue Ball Bank, present Blue Ball Bank, across the street, and that house is still standing. So, yeah, we.
Now you weren't born in the Yunt Mansion. That's not the house you're talking about, is it?
No.
Okay.
I was born in anyway, it's downtown.
Okay.
not downtown, but just up from
There's
town.
downtown and uptown, right? Up the hill is uptown, and down the hill is downtown.
Yeah. So, anyway, on Route 23. Yeah.
Okay, all right. One thing I'm not sure whether I mentioned or not was Robert Wallace bought the property and built the Blue Ball Hotel, and that's what the town was named after. But the Wallaces were in town, sort of the eastern part of Blue Ball, much earlier than that, and had a store there before the Blue Ball Hotel was built. And their homestead is still standing. It's in a section of town that for many years was called Wallacestown. I've also heard it referred to as Wallacea. Steve, did you?
I think anybody that put their hand up that ever lived in Blue Ball, if you have something to say about Blue Ball, we have a few minutes. Appreciate it. Anyone can comment.
I don't remember this because I wasn't there when the fires were, but I remember reading something that's just horrible. But they said you could hear the horses scream from one end of the Blue Ball to the other during the fire, and so it's just a horrible time. Yeah, I rode up the hill towards New Holland. That's how I got home from school, and so I know every bump and every pavement the whole way from one end to the other. So.
Human nature is reactive rather than proactive, and that fire, you know what happened from that fire? That they started a fire company after that in Blue Ball.
Yeah, and the fire company would have been just west, the first one just west, or the first building that I recall was just west of the Blue Ball Bank on 322. Bert, didn't we go up there for vaccine shots for polio? Yeah, she's shaking her head, yes. I think that we walked from school up there. I just have a recollection of getting the first vaccines. Maybe not the first. There was 2 different iterations of it, but I remember walking up there. I also remember spelling bees in there, in that place. And my best recollection is they had entertainment, and they had a couple guys from Lancaster, from probably southeast Lancaster, because they were young men of color, and they did a hand jive thing. Do you remember that? Does anybody know what hand jive is? They would slap their hands on their various parts of their body in concert, in sequence, and they were very talented. And it was like the best thing that ever happened was when the guys from Lancaster came out and did the hand jive during the spelling bee. And Bert probably beat me in the spelling bee. So,
Thank you.
Over here. I'm coming by.
Thank you. I'm just going to say about the house we had in Blue Ball. We bought it in the 50s, and we bought it from Mellinger's daughter. And Mellinger had given the house for $1 to his daughter for a wedding present. So that house was first sold for $1.
Okay, got it. Do what? Do what?
Don Horning asked me to talk a little bit about mysterious Jim Madison. I'm no expert on this, but I did read a little bit about it, and I can maybe tell a few things. He came into town, I believe, in the 1830s, and the legend says that he possibly could have been a runaway slave, but he seemed to have education that a slave would not have. And they didn't seem to be able to identify exactly where he came from because he had an unusual accent also. But he went into Wallace's store, and of course, Wallace was very condescending. And Wallace said, I can give you a job if you can rub 2 stones together and create heat. And little did Wallace know that Jim knew how to do that, and he did, and they gave him a job. And so Jim lived most of the rest of his life in Blue Ball. For a short time, he lived on Madison Hill and made his home in a lime kiln. But he also was a fairly heavy drinker and could get into trouble a few times. But when he lived on Madison Hill, in those days, the post office was in the Blue Ball Hotel. And as the stagecoach would come in from Lancaster early in the morning, maybe 5:30 or 6 in the morning, it would wake up everybody in town, and this just irritated Jim. But it would wake up the people in the hotel, and so the mail was there, and they would drop the mail off, and the postmaster lived there and would take care of everything. But one of the ways he got back at them was he'd come in half an hour before they usually come in, at 5:15 or 5:30 in the morning, and he had this loud bell, and he'd run down Route 23, what's now Route 23, towards the hotel, ringing the bell as loud as he could, waking up the entire neighborhood, and that was his revenge. Yes.
I can't help but remember Bill Weaver, William F. Weaver. He was the cashier of I think the second cashier of Blue Ball National Bank. And it was a small, of course, country bank, started in 1906. And the first bank was actually in the same building that the Conestoga Traction waiting room was. And they were only there for a period of months, and then they moved over to the building that you showed in your pictures. But Bill Weaver was Mr. Blue Ball National Bank for years, and it was a small bank, and he and his family early on lived on the second floor of that bank building. And he did everything in that bank, including becoming the cashier of the bank, which at that time was the chief executive officer. And at night, he and his family cleaned the bank. So they did everything in that bank. And so I have a lot of fond memories of Bill Weaver. He hired me in 1967. And I came in and had an interview with him, and he pulled out his legal pad and took some notes, and that's what he used for everything. So if you wanted to fill out an application for a loan, it was his legal pad that he took the notes on, and so it was a whole different time for sure.
Thank you, Wilbur. And I just wanted to say he trained you well, because I know I've come into the museum more than once where you've been in there cleaning among all the other things that you do for us.
Yeah, I went to the second schoolhouse, which was 2 stories. The first through 3rd grade was in the first floor, and 4th through 6th was in the second floor. So when you went from 3rd grade to 4th grade up to the second story, that was a big deal. You were somebody then. And also I remember at Christmas time, we would go to Overlease Grove, cut a Christmas tree, and carry it back to the school. So there wasn't near as much traffic back then, and that was a special treat just to carry that. I mean, that was 3 or 4 miles. That wasn't just around the corner. It was right by where Overlease Grove Park is, or right now.
Is that a cedar tree?
Yeah, it was a cedar tree. There's a whole field there of cedar trees that are still there, and we would get one of them and carry it. Well, we carried 2 back, one for the first floor and one for the second floor.
Yeah, just a comment about the traffic. Usually when I do a program like this, I have a picture of the postcard and then show what it looks like now, today. But in those days, many of the photographs were taken where the photographer stood in the middle of the street and took the photo. So the only way I could do it now is to stand out in the middle of the street and take the picture. And when I was younger, it was no problem. I was faster, and I could run out to the middle of the street, snap the picture, and then get back to the... I'm not that fast anymore, and so I just... I'm not able to do that anymore. Okay, thank you all very much.